Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to see you. And today we're talking with the remarkable Allison Cardona. She's currently the Deputy Director of Los Angeles County Animal Care and Control, and that is the largest county shelter in the United States. But her road there was not an easy one. And is it ever an easy one? We spoke with Allison a few weeks ago about her experiences facing personal bias and what she sees as the first steps we can take to broaden diversity, equity, and inclusion in our field. Let's have a look, and then we'll come back and talk to her in person.
Hello, my name's Allison Cardona. I'm Deputy Director for Los Angeles County Animal Care and Control. We're actually the largest animal care and control system in the US. We operate 7 animal care centers, and we service over 3 million people in LA County, providing 24/7 services. I was born in the United States, and so was my older brother, but both of my parents immigrated from Colombia in South America. And I think it's always shaped my upbringing and every aspect of my being, really. I mean, I think seeing my parents as immigrants come to this country, really believe in the American dream and come here in order to build a better life for their family was just infused in everything that I did. My dad, he actually just passed away earlier this year, but he had a very strong accent, a thick accent. And I thought it was beautiful, but it's something that really troubled him and loomed over him his entire life in this country. He was an engineer and he was brilliant and worked in different companies, but he was explicitly told that he wouldn't go any farther because of his accent. It affected him his entire life. It's something that he carried with him. It's something that he would say it's almost self-deprecating or jokingly, like, oh, my accent. But as I got older, I could see the pain that it had caused him and that he had internalized and absorbed. And that carried over. You know, we talk about generational trauma, and I just really felt that. I felt that from such a young age. But I have to say that I also felt the resilience and felt that he never gave up. And that's something that he passed on to me. And it's also helped me, I think, with empathy of really trying to understand what goes on in people's lives and why they may make the choices that they do. So we spoke Spanish at home. I spoke English, outside of the home, but I never felt quite rooted in either culture. We would go to Colombia often when I was young, and there I was known as a gringa by my cousins and my family members, which means like an American or like an English speaker. So I never felt quite entirely Colombian. And then here in this country, we were living in Texas at the time. I never felt entirely rooted in American culture either, because I was sort of straddling. But I also think that that really helped me and made me more resilient. I've had a deep love of animals ever since I was a child. And it's something that getting into animal welfare, I heard a lot about, oh, Latinos don't like to do this, or Latinos don't like to do that. And that wasn't my experience what it had to do with people would say that about Latinos and animals. My family loved animals. It was a part of our community. I grew up with a cat. I grew up around farm animals when we would go to Colombia, and all of my relatives had dogs. So it just really informed every aspect of my life. And I think also it drove me towards advocacy and understanding social justice from a very young age. Before I became Deputy Director for LA County Animal Care and Control, I worked for the ASPCA for 14 years. And before that, I was in the private sector doing marketing for an architecture firm. And how I got into animal welfare actually is I think I was a little bored and understimulated at my marketing job. And I was parking my car in a lot near where I worked, and I happened to see a bunch of stray cats, which was just confusing. And somebody was feeding them. So I asked the parking lot attendant, like, what's this about? What's going on here? And he said, oh, yeah, they come here and we feed them and they keep having babies. And, there's like 20 of them. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Just the casual way he said it, and that we were in this huge city of New York City and that these cats just existed. So I started to do research. And at the time, it was 99 or 2000. There wasn't really a lot of information about trap, neuter, return, but there were a couple of organizations who were talking about spaying and neutering, putting the cats back and monitoring them. And, I have to say, when I get something into my mind, I want to do it. And so I said, I'm going to do this. So I put my little proposal together and I pitched it to a couple of local veterinarians, and one, this cool guy in the East Village, said, yeah, I'll do it. Bring me the cats. I'll do this ear tip thing. And that got me started. And I remember keeping a little notebook and of all the cats that I spayed and neutered, having them recover in my apartment and then bringing them back out. And that really, it launched curiosity, and it also launched a feeling of, oh, I can do something. I can be part of a solution. And so I started looking into volunteering. And that's when I saw a job listing at the ASPCA, which completely blew my mind. I didn't know that you could get paid to do this. I think especially coming from an immigrant family and my family in Colombia, it just wouldn't. And even now they're like, what is it that you do? Yeah, but it just opened up a whole new world of possibilities for me. I was drawn to animal welfare because I wanted to help animals. But within 2 weeks of starting my first job, I realized, oh, this is about people. Everything that we're doing is connected to people, whether it's the person turning in an animal, whether it's a volunteer or a foster or adoption, or the people working in the actual shelters. It's all about people. And so the lessons that I learned from my father were about connecting with people and about hearing their stories, listening to them, and trying to understand. And I don't think I had the language 20 years ago when I first started in animal welfare to describe it as social justice or to describe it as equity or advocacy. But that's really what drove me from the beginning. When I first started working in animal welfare, it's like we did adoption events in certain neighborhoods, and we wouldn't do adoption events in other neighborhoods. And the way that I understand it now is that is really all part of bias and systemic racism. And at the time, I knew it wasn't right. And I knew that people love animals no matter where they live, what zip code they're in, where they're from. And that if we just give people a chance, they'll partner with us. And now I see that I'm much more explicit about talking about bias and racism. People have said things in front of me that they wouldn't have had they known off the bat that I am Latina. Something that really sticks in my mind from early on in my career. We were doing a marketing meeting and we were talking about getting the word out to different communities. And the person that I was in the meeting with, I made the pitch to do more promotion to Spanish language newspapers and to get the word out to the Spanish speaking community. And she said something like, do they even read newspapers? I didn't see myself represented when I came into animal welfare. There weren't any Latinas or people of color in leadership positions. And the second I started getting into leadership positions, I not only started to informally mentor people, but I also started to sponsor people. And by that, I mean when I'm in a position of power, helping other people to grow their careers and to advance their careers. And I think something that I've also heard in animal welfare is, we don't attract people of color. And that's infuriated me, because all you have to do is look at usually the entry level staff members and the frontline workers, and most of them generally are people of color. And so if we invest in the people who get in on the ground floor and develop them, and to help other people have a voice and a place and a seat at the table. I think that we can't talk about race without talking about class and gender. And all of the struggles are the same. So for me, just really thinking about the broad umbrella of social justice, and that animal welfare falls in it. When we talk at the systems level, it's not about personal beliefs or individuals, but it's about what's baked into every aspect of our society. And it's so interconnected. And I think once I started to learn, for example, about housing issues, and how federal policy in the 30s specifically and explicitly was policy to restrict housing loans and different housing developments to white people, that it specifically said, you will not sell or rent to Black people or other people of color. And once we think about that, that is baked into the history of our housing, and how that's just spiraled generationally, it's so interconnected. Because what are the main reasons that people bring us animals in the sheltering world? Veterinary medical care and housing issues. How many times do we hear people say it's a landlord issue, or it's a rental issue, or it's a moving issue? So it's just so interwoven. So if we care about animals, we have to care about the systems that affect all of us. What I'm really proud of, our organization, LA County, is part of this huge county. It's the largest county in the United States. You know, we serve 10 million people. Our particular department serves about 3 million of those 10 million people. And I think it's understanding that. It's understanding how interconnected everything is. We have a huge affordable housing issue in LA County, which results in over 60,000 people being unhoused. If we think about that, even just a fraction of those people have pets or are connected to pets in some way, we have to care about housing issues. So what we've done at LA County is really put our money where our mouth is and give resources to keep pets and people together by providing access to veterinary care, temporary boarding, solutions to housing issues. And I think really listening to the community as well has been a really important aspect of our work. In order to move forward, we have to confront our history. So I think first and foremost, we have to acknowledge it. And I feel like we've made really big steps forward. And I'm grateful to Maddie's fund and these Candid conversations that are giving voice to what's existed. You know, this is not recent, this is not new. Racial inequities and systemic racism have existed. But if we don't talk about them and actually confront what is involved, we're not going to be able to move forward. And I think getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and really being able to have these conversations is the first step forward. I think there's strength in solidarity and knowing what people go through every day. And I think also age has helped too. These things hit a lot harder when I was younger. And I think what I can do, and I think this is a lot of my father that like drives me, is that I'm going to make sure that no one that I interact with feels this way, and that people who work for me or with me know their value and can be authentically themselves and are embraced for that. What you can learn in just 5 minutes of talking to someone about their background, about where they come from, about what they hope for their animal. And I guess the last thing I'll say too, or one thing I'll say, is that I've been learning recently about not just cultural competency, but cultural humility. And what that really says is, it's not just saying, oh, I understand that you come from a different culture, so there are these ideas of what your culture embodies. But cultural humility is actually looking at the person and asking them, what's going on with you? What happened? And really listening. And I think in animal welfare, it's what we need to do. We need to really listen, and we need to listen to the people who are most affected.
Allison, welcome. That was so great. Ooh, I just love that. Gave me chills. So Allison, you mentioned in the video that the struggle that you faced, feeling like you had one foot in one culture, one foot in another. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much to Maddie's Fund and to you, Mary, and your whole team. This is incredibly moving to be here, and I feel really honored. I also just want to say a thank you to my current organization, LA County, but also to the ASPCA, who really nurtured me and grew me into the professional I am today. So I definitely wanted to say that. And yeah, this was a really personal experience for me to talk about my story. And the straddling, and when I talk to other people, I've heard similar things. I said it in the video, but my cousins in Colombia were like, you're a gringa, like what, or they would also say, why do you keep saying you're an American? We're South American, you're North American. And then being here, I grew up in Texas a little bit, and then also in Connecticut. And yeah, I just felt very different, and definitely didn't have the language when I was younger. But like I said, too, I think it also helped me to really adapt in different situations. And I think that that's an asset today. So, and even, speaking multiple languages, I know has helped me.
Thank you. That's great. So Allison, not only are you working hard to make changes in your own organization, but I also saw from your bio that you really are trying to practice all of these principles in everything that you're doing, and that you are on the County of Los Angeles Homeless Initiative, and also the Anti-Racism, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiative. And I love the fact that you are moving beyond sort of animal welfare to really focus on sort of the broader scope of these issues. Would you talk a little bit about that? Because I think when we were trying to figure out what's the next right thing for us to do, this is a perfect example of that.
Yes. And, I want to say this too. I'm constantly learning and stumbling and making mistakes. And I think being able to own that, and to not take it so personally when I blunder. Just the other day, somebody called me out for something, and I was like, or called me in, I should say. And it's okay. It's like, oh, okay, I can do better next time. But so the county has an anti-racism, diversity and inclusion initiative. And it started with really learning how. I talked a lot about the housing issues and the housing covenants that existed. But it's just to see how pervasive it is. I think a good friend of mine talks about racism in the same way or similar to diet culture. It's just so, it's in everything that we consume, in the ads. right? It's always like lose weight, eat less, diet and exercise. And that's just kind of, it's in our magazines. And it's the same thing with racism and with discrimination. It's just so, it's in everything that we consume. And it's really just even in the air around us. So I think taking away the personal judgment of it, or it's like, am I a racist or am I not a racist? It's more that I am affected by racism. Everything that I do and all of the systems that we operate have been founded on that. So let's talk about how we can acknowledge that and be upfront about it and then move forward.
Thank you. Those are such great words to live by. I also want to mention that you're part of the association's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So not only are you practicing it outside of animal welfare, but you definitely are steeped within animal welfare. And for that, we are very, very grateful. So as you think about where you want to go in animal welfare, what advice would you give people that look like me, that are definitely make up the majority of people in animal welfare, to think about how do we take diversity, equity, and inclusion and really break it down to those digestible chunks where we can move forward?
Yeah. And thank you for asking these questions, Mary. I first want to acknowledge that I am Latina and I am also very light-skinned, so I understand that the privilege that has brought, and also that, I wanted to just mention too about colorism that exists in many communities, but definitely exists in the Latinx community, where it's something that I heard, even now I hear it, but my whole life, talking about people with lighter skin versus darker skin, and the anti-Blackness that exists in the Latinx community. And so, yeah, I just really want to acknowledge that privilege, and that I've been able to move in spaces that other Black or Indigenous or other people of color have not been able to. But I do think exactly what you're doing, Mary, having these conversations, really, like I said, trying to take the personal out of it and more of, okay, this is just what exists, and how can we move forward? And I think questioning, having a curious mind about, well, why is that policy in place? Or why is that practice in place? And things that can be coded. So even, something I had mentioned this to you, Mary, and your team, earlier on in my career, I was told that I should straighten my hair. I have curly hair, and I bought into that. I used to straighten my hair every day. I blow dried it. Like I had to have straight hair, and it was really, infused, or the message was given that it wasn't professional. And what does that really mean? So I think there's things that we have in our dress codes, that we might not even think of as the standard, but what is the standard? Is it really more of a white dominant culture? And are we excluding people because they're not fitting within that standard? So I think even just questioning things, and you might say, well, what does that have to do with animals? It has to do with the people that we're attracting to animal welfare and that we want to keep in animal welfare.
Thank you so much for that, Allison. And I also think that preponderance of judgment that we practice on a daily basis. It was so funny when you talked about curiosity, because one of my Post-its says, get curious, not furious. And so I'm going to try to practice that more and more as we go forward. Also, I want to just remind everyone that after this presentation is over, we will move it to the Maddie's Pet Forum, and you'll be able to ask more questions there of Allison and the work that she has done and continues to do. Allison, as we think about the journey you've been on and all the people that have been most important to you, and appreciate the fact that you got your start at the ASPCA and then with LA County, what I just want to ask you to speak a little bit more about this is that time and again, what we've been hearing from people is that it never occurred to them that there was a career path in animal welfare or in animal shelters. As you said, even today, sometimes your relatives will say, what is it that you do? And so I think we can't emphasize that enough, that we've become so insular that we've really lost out on a major opportunity to actually be more inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. And even I was thinking, because I was with my Colombian family recently, and I think it's also, they're like, you get paid to do that. They just, thought, or they'll say, oh, you're a volunteer, right? It's like, no, this is my career for 20 years now. And yeah, we were, reflecting earlier that we got our cat from a neighbor. We actually bought our puppy from a pet store. I never heard of a shelter until I was in my 20s. And that most people, learn about animals from the people around them. And so I think, historically, animal welfare, we've separated ourselves, or we've put people into boxes. I talked a little bit about that in the video as well. It's like, okay, adoptions are for this neighborhood, and spay, neuter, and outreach and education are for this neighborhood. And why? What is that? The reasoning behind that? And, I've also seen the changes, and I want to give thanks to the ASPCA too for just really, the evolution over the time that I was there, and even now, and how they really keep pets and people together and are breaking down those barriers. But we just have to think about animals and people, and not classifying them or characterizing them, or saying we need to educate people. Please stop saying that. It really is, it's a challenging thing to hear, especially since I know how I feel when somebody says they're going to educate me. My back gets up against the wall. Just talk to people.
Anyway, we've come sort of close to the end of our time here. I want to thank Allison again for being here. That was an incredible story that you shared with us. We so appreciate your openness, your willingness to let us in on what your life has been like, and also appreciate the kind words that you have left us with about being able to go out there and listen to people, hear their stories, and we will be amazed at what that will do to transform us as well as transform our sector. So thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate you always showing up for us. And again, this conversation can continue in the forum. We welcome you to be part of that. So I hope everybody goes out and has a great rest of the day. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much.